Graham Plattner, the oyster farmer and Democratic newcomer now leading Maine's Senate primary, is back in the headlines, facing fresh scrutiny over another controversy. The Wall Street Journal reports that last year, just days after Plattner launched his Senate bid and ahead of a major Labor Day rally with Senator Bernie Sanders, his wife, Amy Gertner, informed the campaign that he had been exchanging sexually explicit text messages with multiple women. Gertner told the campaign about the messages she found early in their marriage in the spring of 2025, and according to people familiar with the matter, disclosed those texts to make sure that they didn't pose a risk to his Senate bid. In a statement provided by Plattner's campaign, Gertner said she believed she was confiding in an aide. Quote, "We did the hard work that marriage requires. We went to counseling. We were honest with each other in ways that weren't easy." Plattner posted a video message from his wife last night. Here is part of what she said.
It makes me really angry, disappointed, and I find it really shameful that there's a group of media outlets and people who are willing to spread gossip instead of talking about real issues that Graham is running on.
Joining us now to discuss is one of the bylines on that report, Tarini Parti, White House reporter at the Wall Street Journal. Tarini, can you walk us through your reporting, what we know about these text messages thus far, and how they fit into the broader set of controversies that have challenged Plattner's campaign?
Right. So as you said, days after Plattner launched his Senate campaign, we know that his wife, as the campaign was doing, opposition research, she separately went to a senior aide and disclosed to her that she had found in the spring of 2025 sexually explicit texts that she wanted to disclose to make sure that, they weren't going to be politically problematic. This was ahead of a big endorsement from Bernie Sanders. The campaign was starting to explode and do really well, and they were just trying to thoroughly vet this candidate. And I think, whether or not the texts matter or whether the voters will care is another question. But this just goes to show that there have been so many questions within the party about Graham Plattner's character, his judgment, based on what we've seen of this, dribble of old Reddit posts, of previous comments he's made. So this just sort of adds to that. This is another unknown, another potentially problematic issue for his campaign.
Tarini, do you have any sense of how this is being received in Maine?
I think, the primary is actually very soon. And so based on the turnout and enthusiasm we see for Plattner, we might get a better sense. But he's been very popular with, a certain sect of voters, and they've been willing to overlook, problematic comments he's made in the past. He has said he is a veteran. He had issues with PTSD and went through dark periods in his life. And so they have been very forgiving in the past. And I think we just have to see if this is sort of one step too far for them, given that these texts were discovered in the spring of 2025, if this sort of makes them more uncomfortable that there might be something coming down the road as well.
So, Tarini, when you look at this episode and the work that the campaign was doing at the time to identify self-opposition, that was actually a smart move that any good campaign does. Yet they uncovered this and decided to go forward and have Bernie Sanders at a big rally. And you hear Graham Plattner stumping, and he's been asked several times if there are any more shoes that are going to drop, and he always says no. What can you tell us about the decision by the campaign to disregard this self-opposition and to just plunge forward straight into the campaign?
I think that's a big question that a lot of Democrats, especially in sort of the consultant class, are scratching their heads about, because this is a seat that is very important for Democrats. It's a big pickup opportunity, and this candidate had not really been vetted. He's a political novice, and so when something like this comes up, there in theory could have been a plan to avoid this coming out later in the campaign. But our understanding from our reporting is that the decision was made at the time that this was a private matter, that Plattner and his wife were in marriage counseling at the time, and that it was sort of between the two of them and not something that would pose a political risk.
As we've been discussing, this is not the first controversy that this candidate has had. He's sort of been dogged by a number of these kinds of controversies, in part because he's new to politics and apparently had not been as vetted as some other candidates might be. I think we have a list of some of this chronology that we can share with viewers. But he launched his campaign in August. There were a bunch of Reddit posts that came out subsequently after that. Some comments that he made about, I think that might have been the round where there were some comments about victims of sexual assault and black people don't tip and things like that. A bunch of things that were problematic. His political director then resigned, the first of several people from his campaign to resign. Then there's the chest tattoo with the Nazi origins, and disputes over that, more Reddit posts. Then you have these sexually explicit texts that came out and a Kik account allegation. I guess my question is, does the fact that there's been sort of this drip of controversies, does it hurt him or does it almost inoculate him in the sense that, like, he's made it this far? So far, his polling, I haven't seen any polling since your story came out, so I don't know. But so far, his polling, at least up until then, when there had been a number of controversies, had held up. And I wonder if at some point the voters of Maine say, oh, it's just another one of those things about that guy. And rather than it having more of a cumulative effect, it almost cancels itself out.
I think that is the big question, whether he sort of has that Donald Trump-esque quality about him where he can be, Teflon Don or whatever, and really withstand anything that comes at him. And if voters are just sort of tired of hearing this slow dribble and they've decided that at the end of the day, they like his policies, that they're drawn to his personal story, and they can be forgiving of all of these issues that come up. We heard, Graham Plattner today go after, the establishment media, is sort of taking, a Trump-esque approach to pushing back on this, and saying it was a way for, the media to not talk about the issues that he cares about, and instead focus on these types of things. But, that is a question. And I think we could potentially start getting that answer in the next few days, including, again, when we see what the turnout for the primary looks like.
When you speak about pushback from Plattner and his surrogates and his campaign against the media, and as a former political operative, when you're blaming the messenger, usually you're losing, but that aside, they also threatened, according to the Bangor Daily News, former top aide Genevieve McDonald, and they threatened that if this story goes in its current iteration, we'll communicate directly on the record and by name that Genevieve violated the personal trust and shared explicit falsehoods to sabotage the campaign. So the campaign's posture is that this is false right now, and they're trying to blame the messenger and blame the media. What kind of pushback did you encounter from the Plattner campaign?
Yeah, I mean, their focus has been on this one staffer and how she was a disgruntled former employee. But the reality is she was the one who spoke to Graham Plattner's wife, and she has since come out after our story and publicly acknowledged that. And the information that she has shared the campaign for our story acknowledged that and gave us a statement from Amy Gertner, who then did a video. So we're kind of hearing a different form of pushback today than we did yesterday. Today, there's more of the sort of going after the establishment and, even more attacks on this former staffer. But, at the end of the day, it doesn't change the facts of the story, which is that Graham Plattner's wife discovered these sexually explicit texts in the spring of 2025 and then revealed them to the campaign in late August, days after his campaign had been launched.
Tarini Parti, thank you.